Imagine a discovery so profound, so utterly baffling, that it gives you goosebumps just thinking about it. For over a decade, a colossal disc-shaped object, 60 meters in diameter, has rested 90 meters beneath the surface of the Baltic Sea, defying every scientific explanation. Geologists who studied it were left shaken. Divers who touched it reported perfectly right angles, corridors, and a circular hatch carved into stone that appeared burned. Theories have been numerous and imaginative, but no one has ever come up with a definitive explanation. All remained speculation. Mysteriously, equipment consistently failed every time researchers approached. The 300-meter trench gouged into the seafloor behind it cannot be explained by any known geological process. Now, after years of dead ends and contradictions that no existing framework could contain, specialists have finally reached a conclusion. They are not calling it a rock formation. They are not calling it a meteorite. What they are calling it should deeply disturb everyone watching this video, because once you truly grasp its implications, you will never look at the ocean floor the same way again. The morning of June 19th, 2011 began like any other for Peter Lindbergh and Dennis Osberg. They were conducting routine sonar sweeps across the Gulf of Bothnia, the frigid waters separating Sweden from Finland. Their company, Ocean X, specialized in locating shipwrecks. Centuries of Baltic naval warfare had left the seafloor littered with sunken hulls and scattered cargo, so a strong sonar return almost always signaled another wooden wreck, another payday. But what appeared on Lindbergh's monitor that afternoon was unequivocally not a ship. He ran the scan again. The image remained identical. He adjusted the frequency. The result was the same. The side-scan sonar was faithfully rendering a massive, disc-shaped object. Lindbergh recalled his internal conflict. I'm divided in two about the answer. It might be a very boring answer, and maybe I can live without that, or the answer will surprise me. Its edges were not eroded. They were remarkably sharp, geometrically precise. The lines were too clean, too deliberate for anything the ocean could carve on its own. Osberg later described that moment as the pivot point, where their expedition transformed from simple treasure hunting into something for which none of them had a name. The object itself measured approximately 60 meters in diameter, resting firmly on the seabed at a depth of 90 meters. Its surface was covered in dark, scorch-like patches, forming irregular patterns. Strange markings traced contours that bore no resemblance to anything the crew had encountered in their years of Baltic exploration. Along its edges, the sonar detected angular, geometric features that appeared almost engineered. Yet, it wasn't the object itself that first truly unsettled the team. It was what lay directly behind it. Stretching across the ocean floor in a perfectly straight line, pointing directly at the anomaly like an accusation, was a furrow nearly 300 meters long, deep, clean, and violently carved. My initial reaction when the circles turned up on the monitor was, "Hey guys, here we have a UFO," one team member recalled. Whatever this thing was, it hadn't simply grown from the seabed, nor had it drifted gently through the water. It had plowed across the ocean floor at tremendous speed before stopping abruptly, like a catastrophic crash landing. The ocean typically erases all traces, but this scar it could not erase, and that undeniable fact meant the investigation was about to venture into territory no one on that boat was prepared to follow. If you've never heard of the Baltic Sea anomaly before, consider subscribing now, because this rabbit hole goes incredibly deep. Now, let's delve into why the geology of this site completely defies logic. The Baltic seafloor is one of the most dynamic sedimentary environments on the planet. Constant currents relentlessly shift sand. Anything resting on that bed, fishing nets, anchors, even entire ship hulls, is typically buried or erased within a relatively short geological time frame. The ocean slowly, patiently and completely consumes all traces. Yet, when Lindbergh and Osberg returned months later with higher resolution instruments, the trench remained. Its edges were still sharp, its depths crisp, with clear ridges of displaced material piled on either side and heaped at its terminus. It looked as fresh as if it had been carved yesterday, despite surrounding sediment patterns suggesting it had been there for a very, very long time. This was not a subtle impression left by a drifting boulder. This was a violent gouge. Something immensely heavy, moving at tremendous speed, had plowed across the ocean floor and stopped abruptly. Volker Bruchert, a geologist from Stockholm University, reviewed the sonar printouts with the familiar expression researchers get when data tells them something they desperately don't want to hear. The Gulf of Bothnia rests on one of Earth's most stable continental shields. There are no active faults, no submarine volcanoes, no known geological mechanism that could produce a gigantic independent mass and drag it sideways across the seabed in a perfectly straight line. A glacial deposit from the last ice age would leave chaotic, random abrasion patterns in every direction, irregular, messy, the disorganized scratching found wherever glaciers have passed. This was not a ruler-straight trajectory ending in a precise arrest. It was not a landing strip. The object displayed zero geological continuity with the floor beneath it. Nothing in the surrounding bedrock could have produced it, and nothing in the region's geological history explained its arrival. Bruchert examined the data multiple times, and his conclusion remained unwavering. By every measurable standard, the anomaly was something foreign, deposited from entirely outside the system. He later described it to colleagues as the most resistant dataset of his entire career. Consider this. If the ocean had been trying to erase that trench for centuries, possibly millennia, and had completely failed, then whatever sat at its end possessed a material density that defied the crushing weight of deep time. The mystery was beginning to hint at an answer, and that answer was already making people profoundly uncomfortable. But first, the team had to get closer, and the object itself seemed to have other ideas. Peter Lindbergh and Dennis Osberg returned to the coordinates with significantly upgraded equipment. Better sonar, higher resolution cameras, and advanced satellite communication gear. They brought additional crew members and technical specialists, determined to capture a clear image of whatever lay at the end of that impossible furrow. From a safe distance, everything functioned flawlessly. Phones maintained signal, navigation tracked cleanly, sonar painted the seabed in sharp detail, and system checks returned green. But the moment they crossed within 200 meters of the object's center, everything died. Satellite phones instantly dropped to zero. Navigation lights flickered and went black. Sonar screens filled with blinding white noise. The entire electronic suite collapsed simultaneously, as if an underwater kill switch had been thrown. Lindbergh ordered full diagnostics. The crew cycled power on every system, swapped cables, and attempted cold restarts, but nothing responded. The instruments weren't broken. They were actively suppressed. Then, almost experimentally, they reversed course, pulling back beyond the 200-meter line. And just like flipping a switch, everything immediately came back online. Phones reconnected, cameras recorded, and sonar swept the floor with precision, as if nothing had happened. They didn't simply sail away. They tested this boundary repeatedly. Approach, failure, retreat, restoration. Every single time they crossed that invisible threshold, there was a total electronic collapse. Every single time they pulled back, there was a full recovery. The pattern was mechanical, absolute, and perfectly repeatable. There was no gradual degradation, no partial signal loss. It was binary. Inside the zone, dead. Outside the zone, alive. The crew began calling it the dead zone. Back in Stockholm, Bruchert, reviewing the electromagnetic data, became unsettlingly quiet. A rock rich in iron or magnetic minerals might nudge a compass needle, but it absolutely could not kill satellite communications, drain batteries, and disable digital circuitry across a 200-meter radius. That kind of interference demands active energy output, not a passive magnetic presence. The Ocean X crew had sailed over documented magnetic anomalies for years without losing a single radio signal. This was fundamentally different. The anomaly was not passively resting on the seabed, it was actively rejecting observation. Every instrument humanity pointed at it went blind, leaving the expedition with a decision no one on board wanted to make. If machines couldn't see it, human beings would have to descend and touch it themselves. At 20 meters deep, there was almost no light. At 40 to 50 meters, it is pitch black. What awaited them at 90 meters was about to shatter every remaining assumption. The water temperature at 90 meters in the northern Baltic hovers just above freezing, at a frigid 2 degrees Celsius, cold enough to slow your thinking, cold enough to numb your fingers before you even realize they've stopped responding. Darkness at that depth is absolute, not merely dim or murky, but an impenetrable black where you cannot see your own hand in front of your mask. Stephen Hogborn, Ocean X's lead diver, began his descent, breathing a trimix gas blend of helium, nitrogen, and oxygen, carefully calibrated to keep his brain functioning under 9 atmospheres of pressure. Every breath hissed through his regulator like static. Within minutes, the relentless cold began to seep through the seams of his dry suit. At this depth, a diver's margin for error is measured in seconds. One wrong decision, and the water claims its victory. First, they deployed the ROV, the remotely operated vehicle. It carried powerful floodlights, their only hope of penetrating the sediment-saturated darkness. But light dissipated rapidly down there. Fine particulate matter hung in permanent suspension like an unlifting fog, turning every beam into a milky glow that illuminated almost nothing. Visibility plummeted to roughly 1 square meter. The robot crept forward through the blackness, transmitting grainy footage frame by frame to the screens above. Every meter of progress revealed another meter of void. No scale, no reference points, just black water and a floodlight beam dissolving into nothing. Then the seafloor abruptly changed. The soft mud, typical of deep ocean beds, gave way to something hard, solid, and cold. The camera revealed a surface unlike anything the operators had ever witnessed, rough and deeply pitted, yet tightly cohesive. It was not eroded pebble nor shattered rock, but something that appeared to have been forged in a furnace and emerged still intact. When the ROV's mechanical arm gripped a protrusion on the surface, the pressure sensors returned a hardness reading that silenced every operator above. Far beyond ordinary sedimentary rock, the material did not crumble, did not flake, and did not yield. Its surface was covered in dark, blackened patches, with fine cracks running through it like pottery pulled from a kiln at 10 times its safe temperature. Certain sections looked as though they had once been fully liquid, molten, before freezing solid in a single, violent instant. The ROV had confirmed something real, massive, and physical, but cameras alone couldn't provide the full picture. Hogborn and his team knew they had to go down and touch it themselves. What Hogborn discovered when he finally reached it didn't just challenge the investigation. It definitively and permanently ended the debate about whether this object was natural. Hogborn later recounted, "When we swam over it, it looked like concrete or cement, and when we touched it, it turned black." Stephen Hogborn descended, expecting to find a bizarre, though ultimately explainable, rock formation. Having dived professionally for years, he had encountered volcanic structures, coral formations, mineral deposits, and shipwrecks encrusted beyond recognition. He possessed a robust framework for understanding the unusual. His flashlight beams swept across the thin layer of sediment covering the object's surface, and what it illuminated made him freeze. He hung motionless in the water, completely still, because what his light had just revealed was not the rounded, soft edge shaped by natural erosion. It was a straight wall, perfectly vertical, rising at a precise 90-degree angle from the base, smooth, sheer, and deliberate, as if meticulously placed with a ruler. Hogborn swam along narrow corridors, where parallel planes met at flawless right angles. He ran his gloved hand along one wall, following it to its junction with another, meeting at exactly 90 degrees. He described it, what you believe is a rock, and when you look closer, it is more similar to concrete. It's like it's symmetric. It's like somebody molded it before it actually turned into stone. This is the crucial detail nobody talks about. In nature, water and sand invariably round edges over time. No ocean current on Earth can carve a perfect right angle into stone and preserve it for thousands of years while the surrounding seabed constantly erodes and reshapes. Nature simply does not do this. Yet, here it was, under his hands, under his flashlight, 90 meters below the Baltic Sea. And he continued. He kept swimming, because the right angles weren't even the most unsettling discovery. On the object's upper surface, he found a perfect circular hole surrounded by a raised square rim, a circle centered precisely within a square, like a window frame or a reinforced hatch turned to stone. Hogborn stopped, staring. There is no geological mechanism on this planet that arranges rock into interlocking geometric shapes. None. Zero. It does not occur through erosion, deposition, crystallization, or any other natural process catalogued by science. Hogborn pressed both gloved hands against the rim, feeling scorched, stone-hard, cold, burned. His hands registered geology, but his eyes screamed construction. These two facts could not coexist within any framework he, his team, or modern science possessed. He hovered there in the black water, pressing his palms against geometry that should not exist. The answer to why it existed, the thing that would finally, after all these years, explain everything, was waiting in a laboratory in Stockholm, and it was about to make everything worse. Material samples chiseled from those walls and frame-like structures were carefully hauled to the surface and shipped to Bruchert's lab at Stockholm University. The hope was simple. Identify the material and allow geology to close the case. Bruchert explained, "It has very fine crystals that indicate we had a molten rock, and a molten rock chilled very rapidly, and therefore the crystals didn't have time to grow. Therefore, that's how we identify a volcanic rock." Bruchert examined the pieces under initial magnification and felt the distinct unease of someone looking at something that should not exist. He identified the material as basalt, an igneous rock formed exclusively when molten volcanic lava cools and solidifies. He ran the analysis again, yielding the same result. Now, consider this. The Baltic Sea rests on one of the most ancient and stable continental shields on the planet. No volcanic activity has occurred in this region for tens of millions of years. There is no lava source, no magma chamber, no thermal vent. Finding basalt on the Baltic seafloor is akin to discovering a fresh lava field in Antarctica. It simply does not belong there by any mechanism known to modern Earth science. Bruchert pondered these findings for a long time, but under the electron microscope, the crystal structure told an even more violent story. The crystals showed unmistakable evidence of exposure to extreme temperatures, thousands of degrees, followed by rapid, almost instantaneous cooling. This is the kind of thermal shock profile found in materials exposed to furnace-level or re-entry level heat, then immediately quenched in cold water. The fine crystals throughout the sample indicated the rock had once been fully molten and then chilled so rapidly that the crystals never had time to grow. Bruchert stated he had seen nothing like it. He considered a meteorite impact. A space rock striking the seabed at hypersonic speed could theoretically generate enough heat to produce basalt-like material. He pursued that hypothesis carefully, only to watch it collapse the instant he compared the thermal data to the geometric evidence the divers had brought back. A meteorite striking at hypersonic speed explodes on impact. It shatters, melts, and fuses into a chaotic, glassy, structureless mass. Every meteorite impact site ever studied shows the same result: total structural destruction. No meteorite in recorded science has ever settled gently and left behind intact square corridors, vertical walls, and perfectly circular frames. As one expert emphasized, we must have many disciplines. We must see this from many points of view. We must create, so to say, a holistic picture of this in order to find what it is actually. This was the insurmountable hurdle. Two completely irreconcilable sets of facts cornered in the same room. The material screamed uncontrolled volcanic heat, while the shape screamed deliberate engineering. No natural process on Earth can do both simultaneously. Modern science has no name, no classification, no category for an object that is geological and architectural at the same time, forged in temperatures that should have obliterated all structure, yet preserving the precise skeleton of something designed. Bruchert stared at those two datasets for a long time. The investigation had been converging on a conclusion for months. The evidence had finally left only one exit, and what waited on the other side of that exit was the answer this video promised you, the one that is worse than anything previously proposed. We are not looking at a rock. We are not looking at a meteorite. We are looking at a corpse, not a biological corpse, but the corpse of technology, an artifact of engineering so ancient that time, heat, and unimaginable pressure have transformed it into something nearly unrecognizable. The object on the Baltic Sea floor is physical evidence of an artificial structure, a machine, a vehicle, or some kind of construction that once existed in complete functional form before enduring a catastrophic energy event of almost inconceivable force. Something both destroyed it and, paradoxically, preserved it at the same time. That event, whether thermonuclear, plasma-based, or something for which we currently have no scientific language, completely melted its outer layers. Whatever material once covered its structural skeleton, be it metal, composite, alloy, or an advanced synthetic substance, was subjected to temperatures so extreme that it fused with the surrounding sediment and underwent total molecular transformation. The organic chemistry of the original material was annihilated. What replaced it was stone. What we now identify as scorched basalt may, in fact, be the charred, mineralized remains of something that was never basalt to begin with. It was technology, and the intense heat turned it into geology. This process of petrification sealed the original form inside an eternal shell of rock. The right angles Hogborn touched with his own hands, the straight walls, the circular frames, and hatch-like openings, these are the surviving skeleton of the original construction, faintly visible through the mineralized shell that once covered a functioning machine. Just as a fossil preserves the shape of a living creature long after its soft tissue has been replaced by mineral, the Baltic anomaly preserves the geometry of a designed object long after its functional materials were destroyed and transformed into stone. The blueprint survived. The body did not. Now, I need you to tell me something in the comments. Where do you think these burnt-looking stones came from? Could it truly be explained by volcanism in the Baltic Basin? Do you believe there are more of these objects sitting on the ocean floor right now? Because here is the chilling thought that I cannot stop contemplating. The real terror isn't just that one impossible object rests at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. The real terror is what it implies about everything else we have filed away as ordinary. If evidence of an advanced technological presence has been sitting on the seafloor for thousands upon thousands of years, disguised as ordinary geology, catalogued as rock, and passed over by survey vessels without a second glance, then how many more are out there? How many undersea mountain formations, how many strange outcroppings scientists noted and then moved past are in reality the silent, mineralized remains of technologies we simply have no framework to recognize? We have been searching for gleaming metal and flashing signals. We have been hunting for the obvious. But perhaps all that remains of those who came before, whoever or whatever they were, are scorched stones bearing the faint imprint of intelligence, lying cold, silent, and unrecognized in the permanent dark of the deep. The Baltic Sea anomaly has not handed us a neat conclusion. What it has done is rip open a question we were utterly unprepared to ask. The ocean floor may be a graveyard of civilizations we never knew existed, technologies we cannot identify, and histories we have not yet learned to read. Every sonar sweep that has passed over an unusual rock formation may have been passing directly over the remains of something we were never trained to recognize. If the ocean floor is full of technology disguised as stone, and the Baltic anomaly now powerfully suggests it very well might be, then the terrifying truth is this: we have no idea how many we have already found, logged as geology, and forgotten. We have no idea how many we are sailing over right now. If that thought keeps you up at night the way it keeps me up at night, then subscribe, because we are just getting started.